Hey, welcome to Maxwell 3000 Productions. I am Maxwell 3000. I'd like to welcome again my pops, Wayne Carter, to continue our conversation. Pops, it's good to have you again today with me. How are you?
That's a pretty good week. A pretty good week. I didn't have to do a whole lot, so that was good.
You never do a whole lot.
Oh man, I work like a dog. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I know what my dog does all day. Mm-hmm. Well, anyways, I am really glad to have you back with me today. And I was looking at our last session and kind of where we ended the conversation, and we talked a lot about kind of those early relationships with your friends in the schoolyard and kind of what y'all did at recess. And I'm really curious more. I want to know. Well, I'm curious about that, but I want to know more about. Kind of what y'all did around the house as a family. I mean, I know you wasn't allowed to stay out in the woods all hours of the night. Eventually, you had to get called in for supper. And and I'm not specifically at Gamble Lane or over there on Old Nashville Highway at the house where I remember, but there early on when Donnie was still in the house, what did evenings look like around the house?
Well, I really remember more about uh, over there on the old Murfreesboro Nashville Highway that you recall. And
Well,
Donnie,
describe that place for us a little bit, since and we'll kind of transition to that in our narrative, I guess. And that's Old Nashville Highway, and I wish I remembered the address. I knew it for years because Grandma and I were kind of pen pals, but I do not recall the address now. But it's what, maybe a quarter mile up from the Laverne Church on the
yeah,
same side of what that would be a quarter mile west from Laverne Church. Is that about
correct.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah, right there on the right, same side
yeah.
of the highway. And what was that place like? And over just one other thing, before we do move over to Old Nashville Highway, were y'all renting or were y'all buying that house over there on Gamble Lane?
Gambler's Lane. We were renters over there,
Okay,
and that's
and so
when Dad was kind of looking to buy a place, I think, and so the guy named Pete Lanham owned the place over on the old Nashville Highway, and Pete Lanham was that family was an old acquaintance from theirs over in the Gladeville Fellowship area. So he was a person that they knew, and I wouldn't doubt if Uncle Charlton didn't have some kind of connection with hooking them up.
okay. And so, what was that house? Describe that place for us.
Well, it had a good sized front yard and a backyard. The front yard was probably, I mean, 30 yards. I'm thinking football fields. I'm thinking, three first downs would have got you to the front yard. Uh, the backyard was probably another 30 yards down to the garden area. And then the garden area would have been another 20 or 30 yards deep and wide. It was probably, I don't know, 20 yards wide maybe. So the whole thing would have been, and it's a guess, would have been 70, 80 yards. A football field maybe long and 20 yard here is wide is my recollection.
Oh,
The house first got there, the place you remember as kind of the dad's man cave was a garage. It was just a, a block garage, and when we got there, it was just gravel. Um, and the house had two bedrooms, and they were fairly small bedrooms, and in a living room and dining room. But the dining room was really the TV room, and in the kitchen, and the kitchen is generally where we ate. Uh, the heat was gas, natural gas. And we had a gas tank uh, out in the back that kept you know, had to pay to have it filled up. And I do remember from time to time that running out in the middle of winter, and but it happened. We got all right. When we first got there, it was well water. There was a well house just sort of behind the house a little bit. You might remember that that had well water, and a septic tank that was in the back. And I remember at one point uh, they had to clean it out, occasionally. So you remember where the little basketball goal was? That's where the
Yeah,
septic tank was.
yeah, I remember that.
Okay. Uh, Anyways, it was a little bit bigger the house than the one on Gamble's Lane, but it was a lot bigger yard, and Dad was able to have the garden. And really, if you remember, Dad was just really a good farmer gardener. And he knew all that stuff, and always had a great garden. Um, I remember the neighbor that lived. If you were facing our house from the road, the neighbor living on the right was uh, the Harveys. Just saintly people. Had a son Dale that was probably maybe a year younger than Donnie. So that group, and then on down there was some other folks, but I didn't know them. And then the ones to the left of us, the Mills, last name Mills, and I remember they had four daughters. One of them was Donnie's age. One of them was probably Judy's age. One of them was my age, and one of them was a little younger. And they were good people. They went to the. I remember they went to the Church of the Nazarene, and the Harveys went to the Church of Christ, and we were the Southern Baptist folks right in the middle. So,
The diverse community, you might
yeah,
say.
yeah, yeah. Uh, but what I remember a lot, brother was gone. I think between our house and the church that you recalled, uh, the Waldrons, Fred Waldron and Mary Louise and their boys lived had a bit of a farm there, and I think Larry was the one that was Donnie's age, and he and Donnie hung out a lot. And I remember them kidding and talking about how Larry would help Donnie with algebra. So spent some time down there, and then at some point, brother got a job, I guess, bagging groceries. Um, they built uh, somewhat of a supermarket out on the new highway. Uh, in my memory, it was called Alfred's, but it's changed a couple of times. But anyway, he bagged groceries and worked there a lot when he wasn't doing football. And for the, I think Donnie was the manager for the basketball team. So that's good. So he stayed pretty busy. Well, I do recall about brother doing it. It's always stuck in my mind what a really didn't get us much credit, I think, as being a good brother. But when he would get paid, uh, he would bring home things from the grocery store, things that we wouldn't normally afford. And I remember from time to time he'd bring home a case of Cokes. We couldn't afford Cokes, and so he'd bring home a case of Cokes. And from time to time he'd bring me a toy. And so it was he was a good brother.
You were spoiled.
Yeah, bit. Yeah.
Well, like I said, what were the evenings like when y'all would come in, maybe come in for supper, and what was supper like? Did y'all usually all eat together? Did Granddad have to be working late? I know Grandma always worked. She didn't always work. Eventually, she quit working, but for most of what I remember, Grandma worked too. Did she work when you were young? What was that
No,
situation like?
she didn't really work until I got probably in the fourth or fifth grade, and she became a cook at at the lunchroom there at Laverne School, and then later on, uh, she ended up becoming a cook at Smyrna High School, probably to keep an eye on me.
Well, that's pretty convenient too. I
Yeah,
mean, that's a pretty good blessing to be able
yeah,
to, you know, flexible with the hours in your schooling.
yeah, absolutely,
Um,
absolutely. And
did she usually cook supper in the evenings?
yeah, yeah, she always cooked supper, and Dad would generally come home and, depending on the weather, he'd be either working in the garden or doing something until it got to be supper time, and then we come into supper. Now, a lot of times, brother would either be at football practice or working and whatever, so he wasn't there all the time, but sometimes he was there for supper. But and and pretty much supper. It was great. I mean, people pay big money for this stuff at Cracker Barrel, but back then we thought we was poor. It was pretty much vegetables out of the garden, and had some, had a meat would be good. And, yeah, we did all right. We didn't lose any meals.
What's something you remember Grandma cooking? And before we started on here today, you were telling me about a vegetable beef stew that you were eating on, and I remember Grandma made a really good vegetable beef stew, and it was also often after a roast. But what do you remember Grandma cooking that maybe was your favorite or really stood out?
Well, the soup that you mentioned was really that, and at the time I didn't think much about it, but as I've gotten older, she would do some pinto beans and cornbread. And I just thought to myself, as a young kid, if I ever get enough money, I'll never eat this again. But now I love it. You know.
Yeah, yeah, and hard to find some good pinto beans unless you do it yourself.
Well, yeah, and these were cooked. I mean, I don't know, it was all day, but hours
Yeah,
before.
yeah, yeah. I put the turkey neck in it now instead of the fat back, but other than that,
Yeah.
yes, sir.
Mother's green beans, again, she put fat back in them, but the green beans were really good. Uh,
Yes,
uh,
those canned green beans out the garden.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Awesome,
Um,
awesome. Well, look, we've been talking for a little bit again. I guess we tend to do that. I really appreciate it, and I want to continue this conversation again if we can.
sure, sure.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I appreciate it again. This is Maxwell 3000 Productions. Like, share, comment, peace and love.